NHS?
My NHS!
Whose NHS?
Our NHS!
No ifs, no buts!
No NHS cuts!
No ifs, no buts!
No NHS cuts!
No ifs, no buts!
No NHS cuts!
I think we're in St Albans.
Good afternoon, everybody. Fantastic to see so many people here. I'm John Berry. I'm from St Albans. I'm the Secretary of the local Trades Council. And one of the things I'm sick and tired of is people saying, oh, St Albans, they're all middle class, they don't care. Well, that's not true. And your presence here today demonstrates that. I'm here to chair proceedings today. We've got a number of speakers, most of whom, all of whom I'm sure, much more eloquent and interesting than me, and I'll introduce them in a few moments. There are preconditions, speakers. You are not to be party political in any way whatsoever. Yay! Because that would be a bad thing, wouldn't it? And you are not to use improper language, because that would be even worse. So a few words from me before we start. As I say, I'm here to represent trade unionists in this town. And when I say that the NHS belongs to us, unlike the mealy-mouthed politicians who don't use it or who don't care about it, I mean that it belongs to us as trade unionists, and I'll explain why. I won't be remotely party political. After the war, the Second World War, we had the jewel in the crown, the provision of the National Health Service so that people could get health care at the point of delivery without charge. That is worth defending in every way that we possibly can. And why I say it does belong to us is because as trade unionists, not only do we use the NHS as citizens, we work the NHS. As trade unionists, we nurse, we carry, we care, we do all the stupid things that managers dream up in their bonkers meetings day by day. But we, as workers, are the people that carry the can that make it work. And I'll say this, you see, we hear a lot, and we've heard a lot these last few days, about values. Well, what could be more valuable in a society than the way in which it cares for its vulnerable and how it looks after those who care for those who need care? And ridiculously, in the last 20 or 30 years, those people have been subject to pay cuts, redundancies, attacks on their pension, vilification when they stand up to be counted and defend the service that we all love. And that's why, as trade unionists, we have to take the fight wherever we can. It is brilliant to see everybody out here today. I also want to see everybody on coaches when the trade union movement holds its biggest demonstration on October the 18th of this year. Be there for that as well. Coach tickets available from me. But above all, when workers stand up for the health service, for all of those services that serve society, support them. Support them when they strike. Support them when they demonstrate. So, guys, I'm in awe of you. Keep marching, keep fighting, keep supporting workers. Thank you very much. And now, Marcus Chown. I don't know if I'm Marcus, how are you? There you go.
Great.
There.
What do I
You just speak.
do? Okay. It's fantastic to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's a privilege to be invited. I'm a science writer, and as a science writer I normally write about the Big Bang and black holes and parallel universes. But I was born in the NHS. I'm a user of the NHS. My wife is an NHS nurse, and I can see that the NHS is rapidly disappearing down the black hole. Now, the NHS is one of the fairest, most efficient and cost-effective healthcare systems in the world. Countless international comparisons show that it's the best for patients. In fact, there was a comparison only 2 months ago that ranked the NHS #1 among healthcare systems in the world, and the American insurance-based system, which David Cameron wants us to have, bottom. Now, the American system costs twice as much per person. It delivers a lower life expectancy and greater infant mortality, and it leaves millions of people without any care. Now, is that what you want for you and your children? Because that's what this current government wants to deliver. Already, David Cameron has removed the duty to provide healthcare, which has existed since 1948 and is the foundation stone of the NHS. What will you do when you cannot get treatment for your family and your children? The answer is not much now. Already in Camden, a private company has pulled out of GP services, leaving thousands of people without a GP. Now, you may think you have a right to a GP, but you actually don't.
Incredibly, oh, that's much better. Incredibly, the Prime Minister has arranged it so that the Health Minister has no responsibility for your health. He can simply say, nothing to do with me, it's the market. Now, David Cameron says he is not selling off or privatising our NHS, but 70% of the contracts have gone to private companies. And this satisfies the World Health Organization definition of privatisation. Now, you don't have to believe me at all, because the Tory party has already said what they want to do. According to Oliver Letwin, the NHS will not exist within 5 years of a Conservative government. Now, the government says that it does not matter who provides your services. The government says it does not matter who provides your services as long as they're free at the point of delivery. But if that's the case, why does the government take every opportunity to, in the media, raise the possibility of you paying for your GP, paying for your A&E, and all kinds of services like that, to soften you up to the idea of actually paying for something that you already pay for through your taxes? But putting that aside, it does actually matter who provides services. If a private company provides the service, it clearly has to supply profits to its shareholders. That means that money that would have gone to patients goes to the shareholders of those companies and gets squirreled away in offshore tax havens. It matters who provides services, because the organisation of the market, the competitive market in the NHS, creates vast numbers of managers and loads of red tape, and is estimated to already cost 10% of the cost of the NHS. So that's £10 billion a year that should have actually gone to patients, that has gone into the organisation of this incredibly inefficient and scandalous internal NHS market. People say we should increase our taxes to pay for the NHS. There's no need to increase our taxes. If we remove the internal market, we save £10 billion. That's money that could go to patients. It matters who provides services for you, because private companies inherit the infrastructure, the NHS infrastructure, the hospitals and equipment that you have paid for through your taxes. And if you raised money with friends for a piece of equipment like a kidney machine, that also goes to private companies. Now, how many people run 26 miles in a marathon or swim 100 lengths to raise money to buy a piece of equipment that Richard Branson can use exclusively for his own private patients? But the most serious reason that it does matter who provides your services is that private companies cherry pick the profitable. And the profitable are well people.
They don't cost anything.
This is the complete opposite of what we want for a health service. You want a health service that actually treats the vulnerable. But private companies are not interested in the unprofitable. And those are the chronically ill, disabled and old. Now, you may be lucky enough at this moment not to be chronically ill or disabled, but every single one of us one day will grow old. I could list all these services that have already been sold off, but I'm just going to mention one because it is so appalling that when you tell people, they can't quite believe it. And it highlights the incredible failure of the UK media to report what's actually been happening in this country. Did you know that our blood plasma was sold to an American asset stripping company called Bain Capital? Bain Capital is owned by Mitt Romney, who ran against Obama in the presidential elections, and it exists to cut up companies and sell off the pieces. So my question to our Prime Minister is, how can we be sure of the safety of our blood plasma against HIV, CJD, hepatitis? And when David Cameron came to power, the NHS had its highest ever public approval rating. But the coalition has systematically, through the media, demonised doctors, nurses and healthcare workers and undermined the public's confidence in the NHS. And this is a tried and tested formula. You cut the funding so that you make a service fail, and you demonise the people who work in that service so as to then offer privatisation as the solution. This is evil. The lives of 60 million men, women and children depend on the NHS. You were born in the NHS, probably born in the NHS, you get your vaccinations from a nurse, an NHS nurse at school. If you have an accident, you are fixed by the NHS. If you're ill, it makes you better. And the NHS is there for when you grow old. The dismantling of the NHS under a smokescreen of lies is the worst thing that any government has done to its people in my lifetime. Undoubtedly, it will lead to increased death.
Illegal wars notwithstanding.
It will lead to increased death and extra suffering. Now, the NHS unites us. It employs every creed and colour. It stands for fairness and kindness and compassion. It makes us proud to be British. And I'm proud to be here to see you who come here to defend the NHS. I have nothing but admiration for those who organised this march and for those who participated in the march. You are an inspiration. Woo! Some things are worth fighting for, and one of those things is our precious NHS. Thank you.
Yes, the old one too. Thanks very much indeed, Marcus. Is that better? There's sort of cliches when you chair meetings of this sort, and one is that the next person needs no introduction. If you live in St Albans, the next person needs no introduction. He's represented people at a variety of levels, including the big house up at Westminster, And he needs no introduction, he can do it for himself. Kerry Pollard. Who isn't here? Better move on.
I'm delighted to be here. I was able to run across, even though I've marched from Harpenden this afternoon. I'm in awe of what these marchers have achieved. We owe them a massive, massive debt of thanks for organising it in the first place and carrying it through. With Fiona here has marched from Jarrow, and Fiona and I worked together on Open Door in 1996. We haven't seen it for that time, so it's still going. And Emma Tyers here, who's been a national organiser, well done Emma. And baked cakes like nobody. She's done lots of ironing, washing, and gave me this T-shirt this morning. I'm delighted to be here. I won't take long. The NHS is definitely worth fighting for. 1947, 48, when this country was on its knees, physically, emotionally, financially, and we built the NHS then. We are immensely more wealthy now, immensely more wealthy. Austerity, nonsense. We must protect this. We are at a tipping point for our NHS, absolute tipping point. If we don't get it right now, we'll be on a no-brainer for the end of the service as we know it. Fight for it, please, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kerry. I'm delighted that the next 2 or 3 speakers come from the tradition that I spoke about at the beginning. The people who do the work and the people who work with the workers who do the work. Jill Mills, registered nurse, says member of the Green Party too. See, she's not just a political activist, she gets her hands dirty. There you go.
Hello, thank you, and I hope you can hear me well. I'm pleased that the previous speaker had covered a lot of what I was going to say, and the speaker before that. But I would like to share with you my vision for the NHS. I'm a nurse, and I want to thank above all the people who've done this crusade for me, because I don't have time to do it, and it needs doing. So thank you. It's our health service, and I want it run for our benefit, not to provide profit for others. That goes without saying. What I wanted to talk about was our own communal attitudes. This government, I believe, encourages a selfish culture in which people don't appear to make a connection between essential services and sufficient taxes to support them. In this culture, many people persuade themselves they can't afford to pay taxes and constantly invent reasons why other people don't deserve the services or wages that taxes provide. It makes me very sad to see this. The vast majority of British people can afford to pay a few more pounds per month, and I take the previous speaker's point that actually the money is there anyway. Local and national taxes give huge returns on a small investment. But we can't afford to be misty-eyed about the NHS. It has to evolve as concepts of health and treatments change. Health services have to be sustainable, environmentally and economically. We need to take responsibility for our own health, where we can, and work against social and environmental causes of disease. Whatever policies we develop should be based on evidence and research, which has to include consulting members of the NHS workforce at all levels. Planning from the top down is like looking through the wrong end of a telescope. The problems are completely out of proportion and distorted. One way of improving healthcare planning is to value the contribution trade unions can make to this process. They are an undervalued resource in Britain, vilified by the press and other parties, ignored as well, which is a colossal waste of knowledge, experience, and almost unlimited goodwill when it comes to the public sector. In my nurse training, I saw people at every level in the NHS going the extra mile to the point of exhaustion. There is waste in the NHS, inefficient heating, insulation, lighting systems, as well as careless attitudes to resources by exhausted staff and managers, cost not thousands but millions. Many community nurses spend more time driving and finding parking spaces than with patients. Artificial internal markets, as one of our speakers said, have led to budget battles between different sectors of the NHS and social services, which is time-consuming and infuriating for patients, as well as completely pointless, since the money is all coming from the same pot, our taxes. Retaining staff with good pay and conditions would save a lot of money. The cost of training nurses and losing them from the NHS within 5 years of their training finishing is huge. 1 in 10 jobs is unfilled, and the knock-on effect on patient care creates a climate of fear, which a previous speaker has referred to, in the public. We should claim back the cost of training from private hospitals and clinics who benefit enormously from this and contribute nothing to it. Finally, we have a huge and costly inspection industry worthy of William the Conqueror, which reminds me of the Chinese proverb, we may spend so much time weighing the pig that we forget to feed it. Let's tell all our politicians we want to continue owning all of our NHS. We want it to be fit for our grandchildren, and we will vote you out of office if you ignore us.
Thank you very much, Jill. Our next speaker, and I'll do it carefully because last time I introduced you I got your name wrong, is Tracey Lambert, who is a UNISON organiser. Now, UNISON look after not just nurses, the sort of the cuddly end of the workers. They look after the people that do the horrible stuff too. And it is fantastic that an organisation like UNISON exists to stand up and represent those workers as they face the assaults that people have spoken about so far. Tracey.
Thanks very much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here to represent UNISON and to congratulate and express our thanks to the marchers who have captured the public's imagination and support. It is clear that this government is determined to destroy the NHS by selling it off bit by bit. And here in the east of England, we have been used as an experiment, a testing ground for that privatisation. Serco won the contract at Hinchinbrook to run Hinchinbrook, a hospital that was in the top 10 best hospitals in the country, yet this government brought in a franchise to run that hospital. It has been an absolute disaster. Staff are leaving that hospital, and the patients are now beginning to realise that actually having a cordon bleu chef to present you with your meals does nothing when you need good care and support from highly qualified staff. In Suffolk, Serco won the contract to run community services. They announced last week, because they have not been able to make a profit, next year they're pulling out of that contract. We are really pleased because we, along with other trade unions, campaigned against them getting that contract. But the cost to the local community, again, staff are leaving, they can't recruit staff to go and work in that setting. It is immense, both financially and emotionally for patients and staff, and we will have to go through that tendering process again.
Just like Labour's surgery centres at
Exactly.
General Hospital.
And also, just up the road in Cambridge, we are awaiting a decision, a £1 billion contract, the largest contract ever tendered for in the NHS, is down to 3 bidders. 1 NHS bidder and 2, and I've seen the picture because the rumours are that Bergin are going to win that contract to look after the elderly, the frail and children. And it will be an absolute disaster if they win that contract. Colleagues, be under no illusions. Our NHS is under threat, and the adage that you can't trust the Tories with the NHS is as true today as it ever was. Yeah. Sorry, 4 years of this government have brought back many of the horrors of Thatcher's history of brutal cuts. One of our colleagues earlier on said about NHS workers being balloted for industrial action. That's the first time that's happened since 1982. In 1982, as a nurse, as a registered nurse, I went on strike to improve my pay. Our members, having had 2 years of pay freezes, are now being balloted along with Unite and GMB members. We have been told this week by the Secretary of State not to expect a pay rise for our members for the next 3 years. How are we expected to look after and care for patients when, in effect, in the length of this government, they would have had a 25% pay cut? They will leave the NHS because they can't afford to pay their bills. And UNISON have set up food banks because our members on low pay can't afford to feed their families. We are heartened to see that last week, these courageous people, 78 years after the original Jarrow March to London, these mothers set off to demonstrate and to show the people of Great Britain about the privatisation of the NHS. My grandparents fought in the Second World War, came home to give my father and my mother a better life, and they wanted an NHS free at the point of need. I can remember my granddad and mine are telling me about having to save up his wages so that my granny could have a midwife to come and deliver my dad, because he didn't want her to deliver on her own. And already we are hearing that this government are looking to bring in charges for people to have midwives come to their homes to deliver their children. We're not just going back to the 1980s, we're going back to the 1940s, and it's wrong. My grandparents didn't fight a war so that I would have to pay for care. Bergin said the NHS will last as long as there are folk left with the faith to fight for it. We are all here and we do need to fight for it. You, the Jarrow Marchers, have already inspired millions, and your tenacity and determination to fight for the NHS is admirable. Your commitment by marching 300 miles is to be applauded. We have to fight for the NHS. We have to support events such as this. UNISON thanks you for your commitment. We are delighted to support you and wish you all the best when you arrive in London. We want to ensure that the NHS is not just for the few, but for everybody. Fight for the NHS and support the Jarrow Marches.
That's brilliant, Tracey. Thanks very much. Our next speaker is, brain fade, is Megan Dobney from the South East Region TUC. I can't write a cheque or send out a flyer or organise anything without Megan saying it's okay. So is it okay to introduce you, Megan? Good. There you go.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Just to the red flag, by the way, Southern and Eastern Region of the TUC. Thank you very much for the opportunity to say a very few words. Southern Eastern Region of the TUC covers 2 million of our trade union members. It's a third of the country. But I think when we're here, we're actually considering the 20 million people who live in the region, because it's not just about the workers, this is about workers and their families, their children, their parents, their cousins, their aunts and their uncles, all the people in our society that need to use the health service. I've been thinking about you this week. You see, I've got my walking shoes on, not. When I go into work, I go down the Walworth Road, which you may or may not know in London, and I go past a building, and on the front of this building is a quotation from Cicero, that well-known activist, Roman poet, but it's been translated into English, fortunately. The health of the people is the highest law. And I think there are very few words true of that. The reason it's on that building is that in 1937, the Labour Council in Southwark, it was a smaller borough than it is now, opened up a clinic to accommodate the needs of the people. This predated National Health Service, but it and many other clinics like it were part of the inspiration, I think, for the need to provide health services for people who didn't necessarily have the money. So, always the case for trade unionists, we struggle to make our voice heard, and you've been doing it for us, and I've watched through Twitter and everything else, you know, all that stuff, that your voice, which is our voice, has been broadcast to a far greater audience than we can normally reach. So I stand here to say thank you very much. I stand here to say to any of the media, whether written, broadcast, that are here, your role is to ensure that this is heard. We don't just want it recorded and put in a corner. You have to argue with your editors, argue with the people who take the decisions. This must be heard. Thank you. And my final comment is, the TUC is, as you know, a wide, broad church, and one of our affiliates is the Chartered Society of Chiropody, and it may be that when you get to London, you may want to use their services.
Thanks very much, Megan. In a few moments I'll introduce our final speaker, but experience has told me that unless I do the pragmatic announcements beforehand, you'll all disappear at the end before you've given us any money. Here was me a few moments ago trying to establish my credentials as a trade unionist, but we're going to employ some child labour to send you around with Emma's bag to get squeeze as much money with winning smiles from people as you possibly can. So that'll be coming around in a few moments. Can I also alert you to the fact that these resplendent NHS People's March t-shirts are on sale somewhere over there. There we go. Thank you very much indeed. To remind you of the TUC's national demonstration that's been referred to on a number of occasions and from which transport arrangements are available from me tonight. And and I know the marchers are doing this, at 7:30 this evening at Fleetville Community Centre in Royal Road opposite Morrison's, we're going to have a social to welcome the marchers, to have some live music, drink, food, if you bring some. So if you come, bring a flan, okay? And we'll look forward to seeing you there at 7:30 this evening. And so to our final speaker. If, like me, you engage in the sport of ranting at the telly, when, it's worthwhile sometimes, you get extraordinarily frustrated that no one appears to be speaking for our side. And then there are Ken Loach films. Ken Loach films that put working people in an unsentimental way at the centre of the action, as the movers and shakers, as the important people in society. And that's what makes Ken Loach's films worth watching all the time. So to speak for us today, film director Ken Loach.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks a lot. As you can see, I'm not a health professional, so I'm really just here to show support and to say that this is an extraordinarily impressive achievement and really well done. As others have said, you speak for us, so many congratulations for coming. We do share one anniversary in common because I was born in the year of the original Jarrow March. So if I'd been an alert child in the cot, I would have read about the march when I was then. But there's something else. I also was a child under private healthcare, and I have a little scar in my finger, which was stitched up by a doctor to whom we paid money. And that's not so good. So imagine taking your children to the doctor and paying money to be seen and to be treated. And that surely isn't the system we want to go back to. Others have spoken with far greater knowledge than I have about the appalling, disgusting practice of privatising this great national achievement, this great achievement that was made in 1948, when the country was very poor, but we'd actually won a war by being together. That was the spirit of that time. People worked together, they cared for each other. They'd only won the war because they looked out for each other. You looked out for your neighbour. You made certain if there was an air raid, they were in the shelter. You took care of each other. And you didn't do it to make money, you did it because you cared. And out of that came the health service by one of the greatest visionaries we've had, Nye Bevan. And it was free at the point of issue, and it was from our collective wealth, and it was organised and managed by us on a democratic basis. Enormous achievement. And then, sadly, for the next 30 years, we didn't take care of it. We didn't take care of many things. And those original ideas were replaced by the ideas of competition, not cooperation, until finally in '79, the big shift happened. Margaret Thatcher and her gang came to power. And the replacement of the public good by private greed has led us on this path. And that's the great tragedy. But in a way, you've all spoken about the health service. You've heard so many speeches. I don't want to add to your pain of your feet by speaking for a long time. But I want to ask a tough question, because you see, everyone who's spoken has been absolutely right. What they've said has been absolutely right. They know the details of privatisation and the bad effect it's having. They know the effects on the people who work in the health service. They know the bureaucracy. They know all that. But the question we have to deal with is, how are we going to stop it? How are we going to do it? Because when you look around, you see the coalition we've got, you see the Labour Party in opposition, and you see groups on the left who have much better ideas and much stronger policies. But realistically, when we get to the next election, the best we can hope for is a Labour government. But I've got big problems with that. And as I was coming down on the train, I read something that Andy Burnham said to you, and I have to read it out. I've just got this short version. He said, the NHS is being broken up without the permission of the people, correct? He said, the first thing a Labour government would do is repeal the law which puts the NHS on the path towards privatisation. Well, sorry, Andy, the NHS was on the path, was halfway down the bloody M1 to privatisation under Labour. And that's the problem. That's the problem. Services were already being put out to private companies. What about PFI? A great outpouring of money from our public purse, from the health service, to pay for private companies to build buildings that we could get quickly, but now we've got huge debts to pay. Why is the Labour government, possible Labour government, going to end private PFI? I don't hear anything to said about that. Yes, they might repeal Lansley's appalling act. And I haven't heard Miliband say this. I've heard Andy Burnham say it. I've not heard Ed Ball say it or any of the others, so who knows. But they leave a legacy which they really will not tackle, as far as we can see. They won't kick all the private companies out of the NHS. They absolutely will not kick all the private subcontractors out. Are they going to put the catering back so that we can employ people without someone else making a profit? Are they going to put the cleaners back? Some of you may remember the Hillingdon workers. Anybody remember? Yes. Brilliant women, mainly Asian women, who worked at the Hillingdon Hospital in the early days of privatisation, and they fought to keep their jobs were put out. They were ancillary workers. They fought to keep their jobs under the direct employment. They went on strike. In the end, their union abandoned them. I'm sorry, UNISON. In the end, their union abandoned them. The Labour Party certainly abandoned them, and they were hung out to dry. And they took a principled stand against privatisation. Now, is that what we can expect from a future Labour government? I hope not. But I'm not really sure that we won't get the same treatment for people who fight again. So how are we going to do it? I think we need a number of things. I think we need strong trade unions. Everybody should be in the trade union. Everybody. But we need the trade unions to be strong. We don't want deals done behind the backs of members where they go out in a dispute and then they find a deal is done and the jobs are gone or the wage cuts happen and the services is diminished. We want the union leaders to represent the best of their members, not the most backward. And we also want, and I don't know if there's anyone here from the professional bodies, but my God, there ought to be. Is there anyone here from the BMA, the Royal Colleges? You know, great, brilliant, well done. But we need the professional bodies to join with the trade unions and with the political groups so that we make a big united front of the whole medical profession and the working people and the political groups to fight. So we need that. But most of all, we need political leadership, because we know, and we know from the anti-war demonstration when 1 million or more, 1.5 million, marched through central London and the war happened because we had no political leadership. That was the problem. So they can stand demonstrations. It just shows what a nice, tolerant society we are. They can stand any amount of this. So what they cannot stand is unions taking action, and they cannot stand serious political alternative. And that's what we've got to build. And so how do we build political alternative? Well, this is tricky area, because I don't want to be divisive and I don't want to be sectarian. But I think that, as I've said before, I don't think the Labour Party, as we have it, is going to do the job. I think we need groups on the left. We need with the Greens. I support left unity, but I don't feel sectarian about it. We want the Greens and left unity and other groups who take principled positions, organise, join together, work together, and build a serious alternative to the left that pulls the Labour Party to the left, because they know they can't count on our votes. If they think we'll just make a few speeches, but we'll still vote for them, they'll take no notice whatsoever. Cameron would take no notice of the UKIP point of view if they'd all said, well, we'll vote for you, never mind what we're saying. He's only moving to the right because he's afraid he's going to lose the election. We've got to have the same effect on Miliband and co. and shift them to the left and save the NHS. So it's a huge task. It's a huge task. But I think what we've absolutely we have the strength. This is the ace we have, is that nothing happens without working people. We can stop it. You have the power. You have the power to stop it, because you do the work. You do the work. That's the ace we have. And that's what the card the unions must play. And that's the card the Labour Party and the left must play, because we need political representation for working people, and the NHS belongs to us, and we have to defend it. But we've got to defend it with real muscle, not just by speeches. Thanks a lot.